welcome to Foresight Research. I'm Sakshi Singh, your host for today. I'm a research fellow at Foresight. This is an international relations and strategic affairs podcast. If you want to understand Pakistan, you could read 100 op-eds or you could sit down with someone who spent a career wargaming, planning for and standing across the table from it. That's exactly what we're doing here today. Joining me is Lieutenant General Dr. PJS Pannu, former Deputy Chief of the Indian Integrated Defence Staff and quite literally one of the architects of modern India's defence posture. He's the man who helped stand up three of India's newest strategic frontiers: the Defence Space Agency, the Defence Cyber Agency, and the Armed Forces Special Operations Division. He's also got a PhD in business management, is a certified national cyber scholar, and today wears the hat of an author. He's authored many books, latest being Tara Mandal Sangram, and he's also a strategic commentator and Dean of Space Studies at Mary Group of Institutions. So today we're not doing another surface level India-Pakistan explainer. We're going straight to someone who spent decades thinking about how Pakistan thinks. We're here to get into Pakistan's psyche, how it sees itself, how it sees India, and how that shapes its choices in the region through the eyes of someone who hasn't just studied this rivalry from a textbook, but has lived it, planned for it, and prepared for it at the highest levels of India's defense establishment. We're honored to have him with here. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Sakshi, to get me on your podcast of Foresight Research, and very happy to be talking to you.
We're also happy to have you, sir. Before we get into specifics, I want to start with something broader. Pakistan today is fighting an insurgency on its western border. Its economy is on IMF life support. Its own occupied territories are protesting against it. And yet, its official posture toward India hasn't softened one bit. So, is this a state that's actually calculating its moves right now, or is it simply perhaps reacting crisis to crisis and using India as the one constant it can always fall back on?
Yes, Sakshi, I think there is an answer in your question itself that yes, it is on IMF support. There are insurgencies, there are separatist groups, it has problems, and it looks at India as someone hatred towards which would unite Pakistan, because otherwise it is not united, as you yourself are saying. But I will just give you a little bit of prelude about Pakistan, that Pakistan has been talking about two-nation theory. Actually, it's not a nation, it's a creation. It has been artificially created. Before the independence of India or partition of India, which happened at the same time, there was no geographical divide between Pakistan, which they wanted to create, and India, nor was any distinction between how the Muslims and the Hindus and the Sikhs lived. They all lived together. Now, to separate them, you had to create Pakistan, and the boundary of it doesn't run along any geographical entity. So, as a result, when you are artificially creating something and then calling it a nation, by itself creates a dilemma of thought. Now, to bring that creation into a nation or thought of a nation, it only required a military which would constantly keep building the sense of insecurity, and that sense of insecurity would keep them collective as a monolith. If they did not have that sense of insecurity, that the Indian army or whatever, and also there was a little bit of a background that on the day India became independent, India also was partitioned, and on the day India was partitioned, it was also attacked by Pakistan. No newly created nation can quickly bring people together to attack you. So there is a British understanding in creation of Pakistan, which is for their good, that they picked up some Kabylis which were from the Afghan borders, some from across the so-called now Durand line, not so-called, then so-called Durand line, because it was also created at that time, and some from the northwest province of Pakistan. As a result, the Kabilis attacked Kashmir, and they thought that because of the understanding of Pakistan being a Muslim nation and the entire Kashmir should belong to them, when on the contrary, the Maharaja of Kashmir had already, decided to be part of India formally. So this kind of a, military conflict itself made the Pakistan armies designed for that kind of a military hatred or insecurity only help them to remain in power. I'll talk more about it as we go along in our conversation.
Okay, sir. That gives us, some background to what we're going to get into next. I want to start here because you've actually written about this vulnerability. In your piece on Pakistan's Afghan conflict, you laid out the 300-kilometer corridor from the Durand Line to the LOC, the same stretch that Pakistan's own military planners have been nervous about severing since the 1980s when they feared India linking up with the Soviets from the other side. You also pointed out something people forget, that this second Taliban regime isn't, the pliable one Pakistan expected to easily just control. On February 26th, it actually captured Pakistani military outposts. It's now sitting on close to $7 billion worth of abandoned US military hardware, enough to, raise or modernize 10 to 12 divisions. And instead of playing the role of Islamabad's strategic depth proxy, it's positioning itself as the aggressive defender of Afghan sovereignty. So Pakistan's entire 50-year doctrine treating Kabul as western depth and Kashmir as eastern flank depth against exactly this kind of scenario is now backfiring in the worst possible way. And then we also have China in the picture, watching nervously since the China Pakistan economic corridor runs straight through the vulnerable sector. Given all this, does India need to treat this as a live risk to manage? Or because a two-front bleed can also make Pakistan more unpredictable and prone to lashing out eastward? Or is this the rare, real strategic window you would want India to actually walk through, given Kabul is, now diversifying toward Delhi and Shahabad precisely because Islamabad's own playbook has collapsed?
Um, Sakshi, Pakistan and Pakistan's vulnerability also has the advantage of its geography. The geopolitical advantage that Pakistan also enjoys is that it sits on a large coastal area, Makran Coast. In the current configuration of how it holds the territory, it also joins China, that is the Tibetan China. And therefore, between China, Pakistan, and the Makran Coast, there is a good access to the Arabian Sea and the waters. Now, this is one advantage which they get. Second advantage which they get is that in the past, Pakistan was created to serve the interest of the West for the great game. The Western world, led by UK or the British, always felt that the Russian expansion towards the south, toward the warm waters, must be stopped. And as a result, they felt that Pakistan, once they create it, would help them make sure that the Russians are kept at bay. And therefore, they constantly invested in Pakistan. Most of the military officers were trained in the West, in the British academies and the training establishments, and they tried to nurture them. And later on, the Americans also took hold of them, and a lot of Pakistani officers, military officers, were trained in the US academies. So it became a Western constituency. And once they became Western constituency, a lot of hardware started flowing in from the Western world, America and the UK. So therefore, the entire focus was to make sure that Afghanistan completely remains in the clutches of the Western world through Pakistan. So they had to invest in Pakistan. As far as the East is concerned, that is India is concerned, it suited the interest of the military establishment. And I think the strategic depth part, which you're talking about, Afghanistan as a strategic depth in the West and Also, if Afghanistan ever, which now is turning into a reality, became belligerent, then Kashmir they would need for their own strategic depth. So both sides they wanted a strategic depth. Now, this is not what India thinks, but Pakistan thinks like this. That they have been calling Afghanistan as the backyard or the strategic depth. And in a way, they have been planning the military operations and strategy based on these two strategic depths, which they definitely need for their own security. So insecurity is within Pakistan's constitution, thinking, and that thinking itself gives power to the Pakistan military to continue to remain in power. As far as the 300 kilometers concerned, well, 300 kilometers not that it is just to say that this is how the crow flies between our line of control and the Durand line. But if you have to see militarily or go on the road, it becomes longer because after all there is a terrain friction. You have to go on the road and all. But it is just to say that it is uh, not not very far. And technically speaking, Afghanistan is a neighbor of India. Uh, we, according to the international borders, 107 kilometers is the boundary which Afghanistan and India share, which now, because of how things have happened in the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, with British siding the Gilgit scouts, and they were part and parcel of this entire story of their trying to take Kashmir by force in 47, 48. So this is where they sit, of which China then took advantage and opened the routes from the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir to the warm waters. So really, there's a whole complex of insecurity, the geopolitical advantage, Pakistan considering East and West both as something which they would need for their own strategic depth. I think this is a very, very interesting point that you have asked me.
So given the current scenario and the relation between Pakistan and Afghanistan and everything that has been happening on the border, do you like it was part of my question, do you still think that this could be a strategic window for India to walk through and leverage Afghanistan in some ways?
Sakshi, actually, largely for India, the main interest is to have peace and prosperity. You can't keep fighting wars and then expect your economy to grow in a certain way. But you have to invest in military power to make sure that you have peace. As a result, when you invest in military power, you have to also think about what military advantage and strategies that you should have over Pakistan. Pakistan is a nuclear armed nation. Pakistan runs a proxy war in India, in Jammu and Kashmir, and wherever it can lay its hands upon for opportunity. It goes into Bangladesh and does all that, creates insecurity for India. In fact, it leverages itself through Indian neighbors to create problems for India. So as a result, when you look at the overall strategy, India also looks at the neighbors and the extended neighborhood as to how they would all come into play. And now, the new Taliban regime, as against the earlier Taliban regime, this new Taliban regime is more friendly to India. So it is not one way of looking at it. I think it is both Afghanistan and India has traditionally looked at each other as natural friends. India invests a lot in the education of Afghanistan, economy of Afghanistan, infrastructure of Afghanistan. Afghan, you would have heard a very old song, Kabuli Wala, Hai Mere Pyare Watan. It has got linkage to Kabul. So there is a natural tendency of India and Afghanistan to look together. And if it is geostrategy and military, well, that all then adds on to it.
Correct, sir. That was quite nuanced and insightful. And like you said, that Pakistan runs a proxy war, and its entire for like decades, Pakistan's entire playbook has rested on one assumption that we have tactical nuclear weapons, so India can never respond conventionally, no matter what our proxies do. But Balakot it cracked that assumption, and the post Pahalgam strikes, I believe, cracked it further. So, do you think Pakistan actually internalized that its nuclear threshold no longer buys them the space to run proxy war with impunity, or are they just simply waiting and recalibrating for the next opportunity to test it again?
Sakshi, well, it is a fact that Pakistan is a nuclear weapon state, okay, declared nuclear weapon state. It has been for very long selling itself to have a policy of ambiguity uh, in first use or no first use, but they were very, very clear in threatening and sabotaging their nuclear weaponized situation to say now we also have a tactical nuclear weapon and we will use it. So to make sure to convey that the threshold of nuclear war is very low. Balakot actually um, try to look at looking at the threshold level. In Balakot, you realize that the threshold level is not low; it is quite high. Pakistan will not go nuclear very quickly because the retaliation from India would be it completely would destroy Pakistan from the face of the earth. Not that Pakistan, of course, Pakistan has got a huge arsenal, but the size of Pakistan is very small. So for them to react would be extremely difficult if we go to nuclear war. So the existence of Pakistan is completely at risk if they have a low nuclear threshold. But of course, they keep using that as flag for threatening India and continuing to run a proxy war against India. And that is how they have been doing for very long. And of course, getting a lot of support from China and from the Western world. They make U-turns in the statements. They are very, very nimble-footed as far as the strategy and statements are concerned between politics and military. I think everything is exchangeable in Pakistan. So Pakistan that way is not something that it has a strategy. I think Pakistan is very tactical when it wants to be, goes up to operational if it wants to be. And certainly, I would give a lot of credit to Pakistan's generals, how quickly they understand and turn the strategy around and go around the world, uh, shaping their perception about what Pakistan is facing.
Right, sir. Since you said that Pakistan has support from China up to an extent, my next question, I want to build this with real examples because I think it goes well beyond the usual, all-weather friendship talking point. Though I will flag upfront that not everything here is confirmed. Some of it is claim versus claim. During Operation Sindoor, Chinese state broadcaster CCTV ran an interview in which engineers associated with AVIC, the Aviation Industry Corporation of China, said they provided on-site technical support to the Pakistan Air Force during the conflict. Now, what's important to note here, General, that's Beijing's own state media making these claims, not an Indian allegation. Though China's foreign ministry has since been cagey when pressed on it directly. And beyond the battlefield, China has repeatedly used its UN Security Council seat to shield Pakistan, blocking India's push to designate the resistance front after Pahalgam. And for years, using the 1267 committee to stop Pakistan based terrorists from being proscribed. And underneath all of it is the financial stake, CPEC, that runs straight through Gilgit Baltistan. So, even setting aside the more contested claims, do you think Pakistan is still acting as an independent strategic actor when it comes to India? Or has it effectively become an instrument of a larger Chinese calculus?
To give a short answer to it, and then I will break it down further, I think between China and Pakistan, because of the technology, one can see both as one monolith. A lot of technology, the radars, the satellites, the networks are common between China and Pakistan. So if the technology support comes, you don't have to actually move physically and start manning their systems, which is also possible, and it is also likely that they do that quite often. But technologically, without actually showing their hand. It is quite easy for Pakistan and China to start working together as far as common networks are concerned. And today's war is all about technology. It is all about how the cyber and the space uh, bring in the non-kinetic war to kinetic war together. So the claim by a Chinese is not, I think they're saying much lesser, but more indicative. But what they do is, I think, much more. Second thing is that for any wise country, um, it is always good to use somebody else's blood and your gain. And I think China would want to use Pakistan blood for their own gain and not get their own soldiers into a conflict situation where they lose blood. One child policy in any case, their blood is very expensive. They can't afford to have PLA losing soldiers. The mothers cry because they lose one child and there's a problem. Pakistan has surplus manpower. So I think fight with India, bleed Pakistan, and gain overall leverage, which is okay for the Pakistan military generals. They're okay to offer the soldiers. They are okay to offer their name. They are okay to offer because they're also gaining. If they fight with India, see the army chief Asim Munir fighting with India. What he got? He became the chief of defense forces. He became the field marshal. So if they fight with India, they get rewarded. This is too self-rewarding because they start looking at now that Pakistan is together and they want to be seen to be strong in a situation. They want to control the entire media. They want to control the entire perception. They can only do it if the entire control of Pakistan goes into the hands of the military, and that is the gain that they get out of fighting with India.
Right, sir. Like you said, Asim Munir and how they want the world to perceive Pakistan, and the efforts are quite rigorous, as we can all see. Amongst all this, I would like to talk about the 27th Amendment that made him the CDF in the first place. Because I don't think its scale has really registered outside Pakistan yet. People know Munir got another term, but I feel that it undersells it because this amendment created an entirely new post, like you said, the Chief of Defense Forces, dual hatted with Army Chief, and it replaced their old tri service structure altogether. And his 5 year clock doesn't even run from his original 2022 appointment, it resets from the date of the CDF notification itself. And on top of that, he now has lifetime immunity and permanent retention of his field marshal rank and the privileges that come with that. He eventually has been, he essentially has been acting as Pakistan's real foreign policy voice, even on the world stage, as we've all seen lately. So, where do you actually place Pakistan today? Is this still a state, given all of this, where the military simply holds heavy influence, or has it crossed into something closer to a formal military rule, just wearing a civilian costume?
Um, Sakshi, actually, in May 2025, when Op Sindoor started, immediately the chief, who had earlier made statements, against India when he was a chief, it was well thought out hatred India campaign that he had started and calling Kashmir as the jugular vein, and Hindus and Muslims are very different and they can't live together. All that story he started. Then we stepped into a situation um, after Pahalgam. Uh, and very quickly, he took advantage of Ob Sindoor and promoted himself to be the field marshal. Usually, the field marshal becomes ceremonial, and field marshal traditionally leaves the office of the chief when he becomes. So, what he did was he retained the office of chief of the army, and he also became a field marshal. Um, but there was still the chief of joint staff there. He had to eliminate him. So then he became the CDF with 27 amendment. In fact, it's very interesting to say that Pakistan's constitution was written only in 1973. Pakistan came into being, as you know, in 1947. They tried to put a constitution 61 in 1961, which collapsed, and in 1973, which is how many years after, almost you know 30 years or 25 years after they got their independence, or Pakistan was created, they wrote the constitution. How did it take so many decades for them to write the constitution? And now they're going to amend the constitution where the power completely lies in one man, where they have become above law. Now, Asim Munir is above law. And you see the spectacle internationally that the prime minister hardly goes anywhere without him. In fact, it seems that the prime minister, who's supposed to be a constitutional authority, but he can't take a step without Asim Munir. Even White House lunch can't be served to Shahbaz Sharif without having Asim Munir there. And Asim Munir is all there you can see as far as Iran peace deal is concerned with the US. So literally speaking, the country is being run by the military. And that is how it is, and with complete immunity as far as the legal provisions are concerned. In fact, if push comes to shove, they will even bring the political entities and drag them into military courts. There is some ambiguity in these kind of provisions. They can blame them for, going against, some security kind of norms, and they say, anybody who compromises the security, national security, would be dragged to military courts, which is quite possible even for a politician. You can't have now, you saw before all this that the military cantonments were attacked by the civilians. Now this can't happen anymore. They would all be dragged into military courts. A lot has changed in last about 2 years, Sakshi, in Pakistan.
Right, so we've all been seeing all sorts of changes from, the military to their posture in the world, not just against India, even the Iran peace deal and how it's positioning itself to the world that, we're peacemakers now. And I would like to point out that this military regime, it actually, I want to ask you that do you think that this military regime handles its affairs, internal affairs, differently from how it was before Asim Munir became CDF? And to give some background and context, the recent protests that have been happening in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and at the center of it all is the Joint Awami Action Committee and its charter of demands, the 38 points. But the flashpoint is the 12 legislative seats reserved for Kashmiri refugees settled elsewhere in Pakistan. And this committee's argument is straightforward that people who don't even live in Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir shouldn't get to decide who governs it. And those seats mostly, end up boosting PMLN and PPP influence over local voters, which is unfair according to them. And to these protests and demands, Islamabad's response wasn't negotiation, it was brutal force. In Rawalkot in June, security forces opened fire on protesters, killing more than 40, 50 people, citizens actually. And this wasn't the first time. There was firing in Muzaffarabad back in September too. And when the government finally reacted on an institutional level, it wasn't by addressing the seat demand, it was by banning this committee itself and declaring it a terrorist organization under the pretense of Pakistani terror laws. Some Pakistan occupied Kashmir citizens and the committee leaders have openly appealed to India for help. So, do you think they are handling it differently under Asim Munir, or because it's a military controlled country now? Or another question that I would like to add with this is that should even India entertain that, that them asking for help, or is responding exactly the kind of trap Islamabad wants, since it lets them say that the same old that this was never local and these are Indian terrorists and everything like that.
Sakshi, right from the beginning, when the Pakistan was created, um, Sindh, Balochistan, Northwest Frontier Province, uh, Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan occupied Kashmir that we talk about, all of them have been second rate citizens in Pakistan, except the Punjabis. It's Punjabi dominated. Um, Punjabi generals and politicians are the ones who have largely or mainly controlled Pakistan. Um, Before 71, the Bengalis were not only treated second rate but third rate citizens, and that is how Bangladesh got created. So, over a period of time, when the aspirations of people increase and they see how the world is developing around them, there are more aspirations which come in, and therefore they will demand from the governments to invest in their prosperity, which doesn't happen because military doesn't think of prosperity. Military only thinks of control. Um, any demand by a military is not seen as something where administrative action uh, can be even possible. So a military would only look at how immediately any demand is not seen as demand, but seen as agitation and seen as something which is anti-national, and straight away you open fire and kill them with bullet. So really speaking, other than Punjab, of course, not that Punjab is doing extremely well. The people of Pakistan, in any case, are suffering on more than it's a feudal society. Oh, sorry, ordinary people have no place there. And when you talk about ordinary people not having a place, imagine what will happen to the peripheral states of Punjab, which are treated as second-rate citizens. What would happen to them? Just military would control them, and military would do best what military is now empowered and self-empowered to do it. And that is where we are.
Sir, so why do you think that this 12th legislation that the committee is asking for to be changed, why do you think Pakistan is so hell-bent that they would go to these extent, this violent reaction to the protesters instead of just at least telling them or at least acknowledging the fact that this is happening? Why do you think it's so important for Pakistan that this legislation stays unchanged?
The people of Pakistan occupied Kashmir and northern areas. They're all that looking for is self-determination. That they should have their own leaders who are resident there, who understand the problems, who are dealing with them on daily basis. So it is like, external element trying to control, the Punjabi dominated element trying to control. So you can't have an external control to a local problem. They will never understand it. So as a result, if Pakistan was to consider self-determination, it is almost trying to give them independence. And how can they give them independence if so much is at stake, like Sepik corridor passing through it, Afghanistan and Kashmir LOC, as I said, that the distance is not enough. You have brought me back again to think about the strategic depth that they're looking at. So this is the area where they're looking for strategic depth, and this is exactly where the problem is now creating, a security, paralysis for Pakistan military. How do you think in this narrow corridor where they're literally asking for independence and they will allow this narrow corridor to collapse? So this is therefore the answer is a bullet, and that is what Pakistan Army is best at.
Correct, sir. You're right. Um, Moving on to my next question. Every time there's a BLA attack, whether it's a hijacked train, a convoy hit, or a bombing, Pakistan's military statement almost never just says, BLA. It says Indian proxy or Indian sponsored terrorists. And this has happened dozens of times without a shred of public evidence attached. India denies every time, and even the BLA itself has come out and dismissed the claim. So India officially takes no credit in Balochistan. But is this restraint perhaps, according to you, costing us leverage? And could you maybe walk us through the BLA issue, the entire Balochistan issue that Pakistan is facing?
Balochistan is, I think, almost 40% of the overall landmass of Pakistan, and 40% is huge. Uh, Secondly, the importance of Balochistan is that it hugs the Makran coast. So access to the ocean itself largely is Balochistan's, territory. Imagine if Balochistan became independent, Pakistan will literally lose the control of half of Pakistan because even then you will find Sindh having a problem. So as a result, they can't afford to lose Balochistan at all, where there are a lot of minerals. In fact, now they have gone and put in a suitcase some minerals which they wanted to go and sell to America. To really attract America to Balochistan to say, hey, listen, um, this is where you can do business with us, and then you find delegation, family members, business people from America, all now hand in glove, walking around in areas which otherwise is slipping out of their hand, where they have promised future business to America. So how would they say that there is a problem? Uh, they can't be selling the territory or the minerals of the area to America if it didn't belong to them. So they want to actually talk about some disturbance, and India being the one which brings them national unity. So best is to constantly keep using India as an element of hatred to unite Pakistan. But they don't understand that all the peripheral or second-rate states of Pakistan are actually not in love with Punjabi military, uh, and there is a natural hatred towards them. So this is a big challenge, and if they are favorable to India, it is because um, they don't want Asim Munir and the Pakistan military to become so powerful on the name of hating India. So therefore, there's a problem to keep putting India into the minds as the major trouble creators rather than the Pakistan army, which actually is a major trouble creator.
Yes, so that explains a lot of it. And since we're talking about India and Pakistan and the issues they have, let's talk about water, because I think this is also becoming as consequential as anything on the LOC, given that the Indus Water Treaty has now been in abeyance for over a year since Pahalgam. And India has rejected the Court of Arbitration's jurisdiction entirely, and Pakistan's deputy PM is calling it an act of war if India ever decides to divert the flow. Home Minister Amit Shah has also publicly said, the treaty will never be restored. So I would like to ask you, that is water becoming a genuine strategic leverage that we can use deliberately, India can use deliberately, or is there a real risk that this escalates into something neither side can fully control, given Pakistan has explicitly called it a red line?
Well, India has been talking about that blood and water cannot flow together, and it means that all that India has been in agreement with Pakistan is that allow them the use of water and not build any dams or divert any water. But now that the blood has been flowing, so they said that no, we can't have these kind of agreements where it is only win-win for Pakistan and no win for India. So therefore, after Op Sindoor, they looked at the agreements of Indus Water Treaty and are considering on diverting water, using water for Indian benefit, because after all, India also suffers because we also have deficiency of water. Why give something to the enemy who's actually bleeding you every day and not allow your own people to live and irrigate their own fields, which of course will take a little bit of time. So to start was a little psychological impact because this is a threatened being. This will happen over a period of time. But if there is no agreement, then India would be free to do whatever they want to do to use the water. It means that if there are dams created, then the reservoirs will give the India a key to open the dams when we don't need the water. and there are flood situations and all that, and why would India want water? They will open the gates, and ultimately it will be detrimental to Pakistan, people of Pakistan. People of Pakistan will suffer, but the military of Pakistan will gain. Uh, because when people suffer, the military gains. So, really speaking, you are telling Pakistan that this is what we would do. Um, People of Pakistan are certainly going to, at some point, create a problem for Pakistan military that don't keep building a situation where our own children are dying and we have no future. I think this kind of a thing Pakistan must understand, not allow the people to suffer the consequences of the ego of military generals or the status which the Pakistan military wants to have to dominate the politics of Pakistan. So Pakistan is more of a military state. They are not bothered about the people. So this is where we are going. So I think India has made a lot of effort, Aman Ki Asha, and trying to help out people of Pakistan. But I think Pakistan military prevents it. Anything which helps the people of Pakistan and India wants to do trade or anything, Pakistan military blocks it, where they don't want the people to benefit out of anything good which is flowing from India, and they want to only continue to sow hatred.
You're right, sir. That, explains how Pakistan, not its citizens per se, but how the regime has been thinking about all of the issues vis-a-vis India. Your responses have helped us understand Pakistan's psyche much, much better. Now, I would like to switch to warfare with relations to Pakistan, but like more towards how India's defense posture is and how India's defense tech is. So I think we will talk more about that. Firstly, this one's straight out of your writing. So I want to, dig into it properly. In your piece on Mosaic warfare, you argue India is still structured around these large monolithic formations, the corps, divisions, carrier groups, that you actually call them bulky, rigid, and predictable, which eventually makes them easier to detect and easier to target. And your argument is that India should instead be breaking these down into smaller, disaggregated AI enabled units that can compose and recompose rapidly, depending on the terrain or the threat in front of them. What you call is human command machine control, right? So Pakistan's proxy war is low cost, deniable, terrain specific, cross border drone incursions, includes infiltrations through narrow valleys, and sudden localized flare up. And this is exactly the kind of problem I think this model seems built for. So how would a Mosaic structured force respond to a drone incursion differently than a conventional corpse based one? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, see, the discussion is on two planes. One is on how we organize ourselves to fight, or any military organizes itself to fight. That is the structures that you create around it. And second is the technology when it comes in, how the technology would make you fight better if you reconfigure yourself. On the plane of technology, from the analog battles, physical battles, as large forces moving from one place to another. Today we have cyber and the space domains which have come in, and the digital world has kicked in to empower the entire warfare with high technology. Command and control systems have undergone a change where the communication, like earlier we used to call it information technology, IT, and then we started calling it ICT because then the networks made it possible for computers to communicate. So once it became ICT, then we started looking at cyber world. The cyber world comes in, then it looks at uh, a monolith of networks uh, which you can enter because then you can connect with anybody that you want. It becomes a global common, really speaking, the cyber world. And then you have to make sure that if you want to create your own cyber security around it, that becomes one big consideration. And you can't do artificial intelligence unless you have actually mastered the cyber domain. So if we have moved from the analog monolith large forces to multi-domain operations, where the Army, Navy, Air Force, space and cyber and artificial intelligence have to come together. So you certainly have to technologically reconfigure yourself, and you have to reorganize the command and control. So this is the Mosaic warfare is distributed command and control. It means if there is any disruption which comes in, there will be alternative means to continue to fight while the disruption has come in. So it means the distributed command and control would mean that while you are connected, but you are also independent digitally and technology wise. Um, Small elements can fight their own battle, while they can also connect with other elements to join, come in, and go out. Um, the integrated battle groups has been a concept which is being also implemented. But well, I'm not going to go much into how India would want to fight, because that India would fight how India faces its challenges and how flexibility is brought into. But I think the Mosaic warfare is more about bringing flexibility uh, and bringing the autonomous warfare together. That will make the whole new sense. Actually, mosaic warfare is not a concept which I, of course, I wrote about 3 years back. But in 2021, DARPA started talking about mosaic warfare, and I'm sure many countries will be also looking at it, how to implement it. But well, the militaries are quite alike. When you go to war, you find a large number of militaries are quite similar with one another. These are also international concepts, but you can only adapt to those concepts which allow you to adapt, because India, we have fixed land borders. There's huge amount of predictability. So therefore, our configurations have to be based on how we can predict the future. Whereas for countries like US, maybe there's no predictability. They're opportunity based. Opportunity based going into mosaic warfare really makes it very, very complicated. For India, it is easier. So this is how it is, and there are many ways to implement mosaic warfare. So India would choose one that suits it the best.
That's quite an interesting explanation on mosaic warfare and how India's defense posture should be, and how it should also integrate the technology and you know like there was one of your pieces where you also draw a distinction between space for defense and defense for space. So yeah, this was quite interesting, sir, and very layered, very contextual. I learned a great deal, and I'm sure so did our viewers.